Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? If so, here's your sign. I'm Sarah Heeter, the host of Big Brave Business, and I also own a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media. My team offers a 100% free strategy session that is completely private between you or you and your co-host and one of our industry-leading specialists. We'll tell you everything about podcasting today, the market, what it takes to get started, and all the ways your podcast could look. And there's even time for you to ask any questions you have about podcasting. If that sounds like something that you need to do because starting a podcast has been on your list for months or even years, book your call today. Again, 100% free. launchmyshow.com. That's launchmyshow.com. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. So today we were going to do a group discussion and life just is lifing. And we ended up one-on-one. And I'm totally excited about this anyway, because at the time we're recording this, I'm here with Regyna Curtis, who hopefully you remember from her episode back in March, but her episode just aired at the time that we're recording this. So it's kind of fun because it feels like, oh, you were just on, now I'll have you back. But what's cool is that we're just chatting about listening to the episode and like what else kind of was reopened as a result of that conversation and what big brave things are going on these days. And I think there's some more for us to dig into. So let me do a quick reintroduction to Regyna in case you missed her previous episode or you just don't remember who the heck I'm talking about. You've also heard her on Season 3 already as one of the group conversations, but Regyna is a soul rhythm activator and business mentor dedicated to helping heart-centered, multi-passionate entrepreneurs create fulfilling, sustainable paths to success. With over 15 years of corporate experience in business development and a deep knowledge of energetics, she brings together practical insights and intuitive wisdom. Regyna's unique approach empowers clients to build holistic ecosystems where their work supports their well-being, something often overlooked by traditional business strategies. Through her signature system for holistic entrepreneurship, Charting Your Course, and one-to-one mentorship program, Flow and Prosper, Regyna guides entrepreneurs to align their business rhythms with their personal energy cycles, moving beyond conditioned strategies to empower intuition and create joyful sustainability. Welcome back to the podcast again, Regyna.
Thank you. I'll come back as many times as you'll have me. I love it here.
So what we talked about in our first conversation together one-on-one had to do with like the energetic side of you is like, that's what your whole bio is about. And anybody who knows me or has listened to the podcast since Season 1 knows that I have like a healthy dose of skepticism with all things woo, and which you and I both hate the term, but it's kind of most people understand what we're talking about when we say it.
Yeah.
So what you may not expect is that a person who their entire bio is about like energetics and charting your course and flow and prosper and like use it. Well, prosper is maybe less wooey, but holistic ecosystems, like this whole thing overlooked by traditional business strategies, which you might not expect, is that Regyna said to me, I want to talk about creative ways to use technology today. So I think let's just like open it there, especially when your business is so much around kind of more of the spiritual and energetic practices.
Yeah.
How are you using technology creatively in your business?
I use technology a lot more than I think people would think I do. I think a lot of people have the assumption that I am like anti-AI and I don't want to use AI and things like that. I actually love AI. I think it's a fantastic tool. And as being someone who is very I use a lot of big words and I love energy and really feel into the energy of things. It actually is really helpful to help me streamline things and ground it in and make it usable and tangible for anybody. So that's one way that I do. And I mean, beyond just like, hey, AI, write this thing for me, it's more about having a conversation and helping me really get to the essence of what it is that I'm doing so that I can put structure into it. Because technology is a structure. It's just that, right? It is a foundation, it is a format that you can use to help you roll out information. And so, as a business owner, I feel like that is absolutely necessary, especially if you are wanting to go and spend your time being creative and doing the things that are joyful for you in your life. You can use technology to help you run your business so that you can have more time to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a little facetious of me, I think, to say like, oh, you might not expect her to use technology. I don't really think that it's crazy to say you use technology because I mean it's kind of impossible not to.
It is kind of
But I
impossible not
think
to, but
wanting to talk about the creative
yeah,
ways we can use technology is more of the part that feels, I don't want to say surprising to me, but like could feel surprising based on just like your bio.
yeah,
And I think that you're right, obviously, about, I guess I shouldn't say obviously, but I mean, we're friends, so it's obvious to
it's
me
okay.
that I think that you're right that technology actually really is important energetically because all of the things that are bogging us down, frustrating us, keeping us in kind of negative energy, leveraging technology in creative ways can actually change our energy patterns and
Yes.
where we're sitting in our energy. And I want to use an example that just happened to me. I mentioned this a little bit on previous episodes, but over the course of 2025, I have been dabbling a lot more in AI.
Hmm.
And I was always like, quote unquote, on the chat GPT train. That's kind of how I've described it in the past too. But I really leaned in on like, how can I learn to truly leverage
Yeah,
what this tool is capable of doing? The like possibilities are endless. And that started to feel really exciting to kind of tap into that. And but just recently, what happened to me, and I shared this on last week's episode in the time that this is airing, that I got very frustrated with ChatGPT the other night,
oh really?
where I just kept, and part of the problem was that it was 2 a.m. I was exhausted. So I was
Hmm.
frustrated anyway. Not the best time for like trying to work on this, but I was trying to generate a specific output. And I created this custom bot with the intention that my team, if once I tested it thoroughly and was sure that it would work, my team would be able to use the bot without me having to be a bottleneck. That I
Yeah,
could kind of train this to have my stipulations in place so that my team could use it and be generating some creative outputs for the business without everything having to get approved by me first.
yeah.
And so the custom GPT being able to act as like my approval level, and it just wasn't freaking working. And I was getting so frustrated and I kept going back and forth with it, and I was saying like, how could I be clearer? Like, is this in your instructions? And be like, oh, this is in the instructions, and you're being very clear. And we've talked about this several times. And it literally even said to me, you have every right to be frustrated. You're not crazy. You've already said this to me as plainly as possible. Like, it was validating, which is nice to be validated, but it's also like, okay, well then
But then
why
why
the
is
hell
it
aren't
not
you doing
working?
it? Because you're not a person, so you're not actually learning anything, and that is very
Yes.
frustrating. And so just in a like tizzy in the middle of the night, all angry, I went to Claude for the first time, never used
Oh,
it before.
I
I
haven't
felt like
either.
a loyalty to Chat GPT. This felt like cheating on chat a little bit to go to Claude, but I'd heard Claude is great for creative outputs. I've since
Mhm.
learned Claude is also great for data analysis
Oh,
and
nice.
producing like workflows and flowcharts. Like Okay. I have not
Mhm.
experimented with that yet, but I've just learned that about Claude. But these things that are frustrating as hell to try to do on ChatGPT, and the energetic shift that happened for me within
Mm,
10 minutes of switching to Claude. Like, oh
nice.
my God, this is everything that I hoped it would be. It's going to still take a little bit of massaging to get exactly where I wanted to be, but in 10 minutes, I had a result that I felt confident about, excited about, and like this is coming back around to my original point, which is that technology, I think, does have the ability to both energetically shift us negatively, as well as to energetically shift us into this extra creative space.
Yes.
That means then yesterday, as a result of having discovered this at 2 a.m., that I love Claude, I was in this creative, like this super creation mode, this like higher level of being with creativity, of just like, I want to output all the stuff. Like,
I love
I
it.
feel so relieved of the me that was holding me back, because not only will my team be able to use this, but I can use this where I have my level of approval on all the things that I'm creatively generating. And it made me want to create all the stuff, all the things.
That I want to I want to highlight what you just said for a second because this is super important. You said, I have my level of approval on the things that I'm generating for myself, right? And this is one of the things that sometimes, as an entrepreneur, you just hit decision fatigue, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you are just tired. Sometimes you're hungry. Sometimes you're distracted by a million different things, right? If you can actually create or recreate in a repeatable way
Yes.
your own standards, your own, like, not only for somebody else to be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to make this decision for you, but I'm going to help myself make this decision because when I laid it all out in a very intentional way and put all the data together to know that these are the factors that I'm going through, that actually saves me the energy of having to do it even for myself.
Yes. So I think when you, and this is why I think this is, you're exactly the person I want to talk to about this, because I think we tend to think of kind of more holistic entrepreneurship as about things being focused only on the offline stuff, like the
Yes.
mental health and the radical self care and meditation and reflection and truly treating yourself as a whole person. But in 2025, your whole person interacts with and engages with technology all day. And when you
All
can
day.
put in place technological solutions that actually help, and I think this is why when you said like people might expect me to be against AI, but I actually think it's great. There are things that I have very, and I've talked about them a lot on this podcast, some very real concerns about
Yeah.
ethics and climate impact and all kinds of things about AI that I think are like important discussions. And for marginalized groups, for people with disabilities, for neurodivergent people, for any number of people, AI has the opportunity, and not just AI, but technology solutions have the opportunity to help close productivity gaps or
Yes.
accomplishment gaps or functional gaps or whatever, right? It doesn't just have to be like, oh, like you can achieve so much more. It can also just be like you can exist in a healthy place better.
Yeah, I think it's not only about productivity, it's about efficiency, it's about creativity. Two examples when you were talking, I'm all about metaphors and utilizing metaphors, and there are two that I use actually quite often. One is that you said that this technology helped you get into a creative space. And so I actually just wrote a whole chapter about this in my book. And so this metaphor is very like vibrant in my brain. But when airplanes fly, they fly 7 miles usually above. where the tallest building is usually like maybe half a mile tall, right? They fly that high because up there in the thinner air, there's less drag. They can burn less fuel. It's more efficient, right? And in
Okay, I
this
love
chapter, the
this.
reason why I'm bringing this in is because I go through this whole kind of like description of how this helps the plane fly more effectively, more efficiently, and it's a good business decision, right? You spend less money when you are burning less fuel. And the same thing happens when you go into a space energetically where you are in these more creative flow of energy.
Mhm.
When you go into more ethereal spaces and can be in that creative space, you are burning less mental fuel. You are moving more quickly, more
Yes.
fluidly, more, more effectively, more efficiently. And when you can be in that creative space, because you are supported by the technology and you get to just flow in your creativity, that is also a good business decision, right?
Yes.
You are expending less resources to be able to do more quicker, faster, and more effectively.
Yes, even just the phrase when you were describing about an airplane less drag, that like
Yes.
just immediately resonated for me because that's exactly where I felt like I was at 2 a.m. fighting with ChatGPT. Is
Yep.
like, this is dragging. At this point, I would be better off just being the bottleneck. Like, I
Right.
mean, and that is frustrating. And I think that can be the double-edged sword of technology is that sometimes there's some extra steps, like, and to go with the airplane analogy even further, like
Yeah.
how many
Do it.
people tried to create a viable model for an airplane before there actually was one that worked, let alone the planes that we have today that are significantly more efficient and effective and
Right.
faster, et cetera, and safer, right? Like the initial kind of development phase of human flight was messy at best.
Yes.
Like,
At best.
so I think like that's the part that feels like a pain point to lean into technology. And that can be like a big obstacle
It
energetically.
can.
But
Yeah.
the payoff on the other side is so good.
Exactly. Yes, it is so good. And yeah, that part at first, like those planes, they weren't necessarily like flying 7 miles above the earth, right? They were like barely above. And it was really just about like getting somewhere more effectively, more efficiently. It wasn't about saving on fuel. Those are the refinements that come later. But I actually want to bring it to the other metaphor that came through too, which is like the most basic. It's more of a hardware than technology necessarily, but when you grow tomatoes, you use a trellis to actually help them grow, right? And that foundational piece is called a tomato cage. It's one way of calling it, right? But the cage is not meant to keep the tomatoes in. The cage is there to support the growth. And so it creates places for the vines to actually rest because the tomatoes, when they grow and they ripen, are very heavy. And so as the plant grows, it grabs onto the trellis and it climbs up and it rests there and it allows it to carry or hold some of the weight so that the tomato can ripen and the plant can continue growing toward the sun, right? So technology can be that infrastructure that helps you rest, that helps you hold some of the weight so that you can ripen, so that you can continue to grow and be supported in that. So, yeah, sometimes even just the most basic elemental functions are there that actually creates a much better output. Sometimes you need something that's much higher level, and you can get to that higher level where you're really looking at like efficiency and profitability and all of those things as a refinement, but you've got to first build the basic model that can get you off the ground.
So for you personally, have you always been like a tech inclined person or a tech lover, or has this been something you've had to like learn for yourself?
I would say I've never been asked that question. I would say yes, I have been a tech inclined person, but not in the, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have called it that. So, for instance, my brother loved video games. I've never been a big video game person, but I have, but when, for instance, when my grandparents had a computer and it had like a floppy disk, like with programs on it, like the big floppy disk, not even the little ones. And I remember when they got it, I was so excited because it had a typing program on it. And so for me, that was like super exciting. I wanted to learn how to type, and I would see how fast I could go. Like that was like a video game for me, right? Like I would put
Yeah.
it in and then I would type the words and it would like get a score and it would tell me how accurate it was. I remember playing with that when I was very little. And all the other things that were technology just they may not stand out as being like techie kind of thing. Like I wasn't into like coding or things like that, but I have always been really interested in how I can use technology to help me do the things I want to do faster, better, more efficiently, more fun, whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm interested in this, and I think some of this is generational, but for me, I definitely have been a person who loves it and is drawn to it. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating is that no adult looked at me growing up and said, a girl who loves technology like this, you should pursue this in college. Like I was pushed
Mhm.
toward law, teaching, whatever, like these things that are more like social skill based. But like at 11, I was part of like an after school thing called Web Club. We didn't even have like computers, right? But we had a notepad and we sat around a table and we like learned HTML from scratch on with pencil and paper. And then like periodically we got the chance to go to the computer lab, the one computer lab, and we got to type in our code into like Notepad and to be able to see what that HTML file would actually look like. And I had a computer at home that did not have internet access. So I would like go home and practice and like build
Mhm.
websites. And I ultimately ended up building websites like even for kind of local businesses.
That's
And
cool.
I would type them on a computer without internet access into Notepad, save it to a floppy disk, and then use
Carry
that,
it with
take that
you.
floppy disk, yeah, to a computer with internet access and upload it to the internet.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so, and then I had this whole like kind of entrepreneurial vision. Do you remember like Neopets and that kind of era of like HTML based website games, like
Yeah.
very basic? Most
Like
of the game is clicking.
snake.
It's
Yeah.
not like there's no they had some like flash games on Neopets too, but the bulk of like quote unquote exploring the world was just going from one web page to another web page. And there were just like
Okay.
graphics that were like, okay, cool. And it just tells you a story based on where you're clicking. So I actually had this whole vision for in middle school for a website like this. And I think back on this and I'm like, I so wish I had done it
I know.
because I could be a like billionaire now. But anyway, it was called like Shoeboxville, and it was the same kind of idea where like there's characters and you click around, and so I was like learning JavaScript and I learned HTML, CSS, like, and so I was like coding this whole
Yeah.
project, and then I abandoned it because I was in middle school, and it was sort of like at the time I think there was sort of this impression of like this is a waste of your time. Why are you doing this?
Hmm.
So it was more just like a hobby. But I would like my best friend and I used to code AOL Instant Messenger like extended profiles. Do you remember those? Like for your
Yeah.
profile, it had a limited number of characters. So like people started doing these like mini websites that you could click a link in the profile. This was the original link in bio.
I
The,
know.
the like
It
link
was
in
the
your
original.
profile to take you to like a separate profile. Anyways, we used to build those for people also for money. So anyways, I say all this
I love
to
it.
say I've always been into like I want to learn the thing and then
Yes.
like thinking about it from an entrepreneurial standpoint of so for me to say like, oh, I'm interested in generative AI and I want to learn about it, or like, oh, I'm interested in I had another example. Like, I mean, even podcasting. Like, I want to learn how do you, I like listening to them. So, like, how do you get one on the internet? How do you edit one? How do you, editing video was a big thing that I taught myself in high school as well. Like, I remember when Windows Movie Maker came out, thinking, like, oh, cool, I want to make movies. And it turns out, like, you have to have video footage to work with. Like, you don't
Yeah.
just have it, like, you have to,
Right.
like, have a video footage to work with and then you can edit it. So I became obsessed with like recording video clips so that I could make quote
So
unquote
you were making
movies. Like
B-roll.
literally. So to me, being interested in technology like this, automation, AI, like, of course I am. I've
Mhm.
always had a natural interest in this and a natural knack for it. But what I hear from people all the time is like, I'm not a tech person, or
Yeah.
like, I'm intimidated by this. I'm scared of it. It's not for me. It seems complicated. So like, what what's your relationship to that? And also, what would you say to someone listening who might be thinking that?
Well, I think that it can be complicated if you don't know it, right? But the way that you get to know it is by doing it, by playing with it, by fucking shit up. Like you've got to actually try it and do it wrong in order to figure out how to do it right, right? Like I love Canva. Like I'm a total whiz in Canva. I love that platform. Pretty much it's how I think, right? I'm like, oh, let me just go in Canva and play around with some stuff and I'll figure it out. And the things that I do in there are like I build and like create layers. And I think back to like in middle school, or in high school, I was on the yearbook committee and I was doing like layouts in the yearbook and on very, very simple technology. I can't even remember what the program was, but it was like the simplest form, like Canva,
But
like
works
runs laps
really
around it.
similarly, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely, right? It's all about like moving boxes
The elements.
in
Yep.
space,
Uh-huh.
right? Like you're moving stuff around. And then I think about in high school, I was really interested in I do have a point and I'll wrap it back in, but I want to illustrate these two examples because we had a project in our senior year called IOTA. It was called Individual Opportunity to Achieve. And basically you just it was like a capstone project. You got to choose a thing that you were interested in and then go all in with it, right? And you had to do an internship and you wrote the whole thing with the assistance and approval of a teacher, of course,
Okay.
but like I wanted to study about music videos. And I
Mhm.
wanted to go into it from the perspective of does the music video with the video, like the imagery, versus the music alone without the imagery, give a different perspective? Like, do people think the song is about something different? So I set up this whole like beta test of I had three different groups of people, one who saw the video and heard the music at the same time, one that just heard the video, saw the video, and one that just heard the music. And then I compared and like did, cross-reference to see that. But then I had to create a project. And so I was like, well, I'll create my own music video. So the internship that I got was at a studio where they were making videos. And so I learned how to use a soundboard and I learned how to use the video equipment and I learned how to like mix tracks and pull tracks out, like soundtracks out. And
Wow.
it was really super cool. And I think having that knowledge, like even today when I go into something like Canva, right? Literally earlier today before this call, before we got on here, somebody was like, how do I add sound and like music and my voice? Like, how can I do that in a really simple way? And I was like, here, you could do it in this way, you could do it in that way. But she was asking for like a very low tech version. So I open up Canva. This is like an ad for Canva. I swear. They're not paying me, but
Sponsor us.
right, I'm using it just because it is a thing that I use all the time. But
Hmm.
I opened it up and I showed her. And as I was doing that, I mean, this is the thing that I learned how to do in high school. I
Yeah.
learned how I showed her like this is how you pull in an audio track and this is how you pull in the music and then you can move these and like it
Yeah.
was a very different level of technology,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have the joy or the experience or the
Yeah.
expertise that I have today if I hadn't gotten in there and just tried it. Like that's the thing is it's only here's my big point I think that I want to make is technology is programmed by humans, right? Even AI, which is programmed to learn and get smarter, it's still created by humans. So we are using this actively, intentionally to help ourselves. And so if you go into a relationship with technology, as in like, it's going to get the best of me, I'm not going to be able to do this, remember that if you go into that, you're making that your reality, right? Or
Yeah.
you can go into it and say, someone created this because they wanted to make it easier for me. Someone created this because they wanted to help me in some way.
Yeah. How interesting. I feel like someone said to me about Chat GPT, you can't break it. So get in there and just experiment and see what happens. And I love that kind of mindset. Now, of course, that's not true with all types of technology, right? Like there's some
Some you
things you
can
can
break.
definitely break, and some of it's really expensive. So you're not really
Yes.
like trying to go in and experiment on something that you're then actually going to break. But something like that, to go in as a user of ChatGPT and know that like you can't break it, you're just seeing what does and doesn't work. That's interesting. And I think generally speaking, that is cool and that is helpful. But I think about how frustrated I was when I wasn't getting the
Yeah.
result that I wanted. And I also acknowledge that, number one, if you go in to try to experiment with something and it doesn't work, how frustrating that is. But number two, you need to have examples of what it's even capable of so you know what to go in and experiment with. And so I think that's where like quality use cases come
Yeah.
from. And when I say use case, if that's like already out of your wheelhouse, I'm talking about like when people make those lists that are like 5 things you didn't know ChatGPT could do. That's
Yeah.
a use case, right? So I think the kind of third, kind of final point I want to kind of address of pain points here is that, and I mentioned this at some point on this podcast, but I don't know at the time that this episode comes out, like, has it come out? I don't know. We're trying to figure out what
When
we're
was
doing.
that?
But I read a book earlier this year called Women's Work, I think it was called, The First 20,000 Years. And it was about literally the first 20,000 years of humanity and what women's kind of role was in work. And one of the things
Mhm.
that stood out the most about this book to me is that one of the kind of themes or takeaways is that from the beginning of human existence, before humans even had stationary homes, right?
Mhm.
Women's role and their work in community, and I'll say even childbearing people, but you don't necessarily have to be a childbearing person to fall into these genderized roles, which
Right.
is the caretaking element of making sure that the people are being taken care of, the people are being cared for. So those caretaking roles end up being taken on disproportionately, right, by women. Whereas, and this is going to be very gender binary because this book was very gender binary, so
Right.
that's the context that I have, but men were going out and doing experimentation and exploration and that kind of thing. And women were making sure that the boat doesn't sink, so to speak, right? Like women are making sure that shit is taken care of. We need to make sure we eat. We need to make sure we sleep. We need to make sure we have, everybody has all the things that they need, because if somebody doesn't make sure that happens, it's, humanity will not continue to survive. So
Right.
women have disproportionately been the people who take on those types of roles. Now, if women are doing those roles and they're multitasking, and so this was like a big part of the book, they're multitasking, they're in community, so they're doing work that usually takes more than one person and they're helping each other. They're doing work that needs to be, their tasks like creating fabric and weaving and whatnot need to be things that are very repetitive and easily interruptible, because they're going to be interrupted because they're multitasking all day long. So these themes have, if these themes have always been true, then the reason innovation has primarily happened by men is not because women are not innovative. It's because women don't have the resources or the bandwidth to fuck around and find out. They
Mm.
have to be efficient, they have to be effective, they have to get results the first time. And experimenting just for the sake of experimenting does not fit into their schedule. Whereas men, literally, that was their whole role, was to fuck
Right.
around and find out.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling the resistance of just go around and play with it, you can't break it, it is not just generationally or ancestrally ingrained
Yeah.
into you, but literally from the beginning of humanity, you
Yeah.
have probably fallen into being passed down that human instinct to be in more of the caretaker role, which is, we don't have the freedom of innovation. And I think that makes that's a big context perspective for why adoption of technology and AI is like gender skewed, why the innovation that typically happens tends to be very white heteronormative male, because we can also then,
Fair.
once we get to like more modern history, we can get into kind of race elements of that too, of like
Absolutely.
who in society has the privilege of innovation. It's a very specific group of our population. So
Yeah.
if experimentation feels foreign to you, hopefully this helps explain why.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that also in in the like get in there and try it, it's not always the fuck around and find out mentality. It's more the like learn how to use it,
Yep.
right? And I will say it has been my experience that well, I'll say I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs or female identifying entrepreneurs, but I work with all people, right? There's all sorts of people that I work with as entrepreneurs. I will say that the ones who are more in that realm of the like female entrepreneur are generally driven by I have a need I need to fill and I this is what I need it for, right? Versus, and I'm not going to say comparatively because I just don't have as many men in my world to compare that. But the ones that are my clients, I see them generally looking for not I want to go and experiment and just be in that space of innovation. It is I want to go and figure out and solve a problem.
Yep.
However, also, I will say that it's not as much in our documented history or documented resources, but a lot of women are innovators. And the women are innovators for the need, right? Like not necessarily just going out there and being like, what can I innovate today, right? From a place of just general like exploration, but this is a thing that I need and I need it done more effectively. I need it done more efficiently. And so then a solution is created from that. And
Yep.
so if that is what you're looking for, do it, right? Like if there is something that you need, that you desire, that you want, that is not doing what you need it to do, then figure out how to do it differently. And we haven't really talked about, we've talked more about my personal business, but we haven't really talked about the community that I am co-founding with my co-founder, Monica Henderson. We are essentially creating a tech startup. It is very technology driven. It is very tech supported by technology, and we're using technology in very different ways. And it comes from a desire to connect and be in community. A lot of those things that you were saying from this book about women doing multitasking and in working in communities and being interrupted a whole lot, like all of those things, I was like, check, check, check.
Mm.
But we're actively and intentionally using technology to support that work so that we can be connected with people all over the world, so that we can work in community even when we are running businesses as individuals, even when we're solopreneurs, and doing it in not only effective and efficient ways, but also playful and just fun. Like
Yeah.
we have a lot of fun with it, right? Like there is a kind of gamification element to it. And it is the first time that I've really gotten to play with technology in that way, where, because in the past it has either been a lot of it has really been about looking for efficiency, right? Or looking for, there's this creative thing that I want to do, and I need something to support that creative thing. So I'm going to figure that out. And this gets to be like a living game where we're actually doing really important work.
I love this. I mean, I love so much about this. And I think I want to call back what you said about you used the terminology like solving problems. People who are more likely to approach you because they're or to who work with you who have a perspective that's like about solving a problem. Or I
Mhm.
was taking that a step further and saying making the world better.
Yes.
And what we can do to kind of summarize that is like mission driven work. And I think this is such an interesting kind of note is that people, it's a very distinct group of people who are tend to be more successful in business. And when I say successful, I'm defining success as building wealth, longevity, and buying and selling businesses.
Yeah.
Right. Building a business with staying power that is tremendously profitable. The people who primarily succeed at that are disproportionately men, heteronormative, cisgender, white men of a certain social class and a certain age group, right? Like demographically, that is those people. And they
Right.
build those businesses because of some mentality, mindset things around being profit driven.
Hmm.
And yes, they understand that their business has to solve a problem and pain point marketing and all of those things from us, but it's always from a standpoint of in order to drive profit, not
Yes.
in order to make the world better. And this is where a lot of business coaching doesn't hold up for people who are mission driven, because
Yes.
then that same advice does work to build a profitable business, but it feels bad because
Right.
we're wanting to do this with different intentions and motivations, even if the same advice can still apply. And I think that taking that a step further, we can say not just women, right? But I want to like emphasize looking at intersectionality of your identity from race, from
Mhm.
disability, from neurodivergence, from like all of these different things that could disproportionately impact your nervous system. And this is where the energetic side really comes into play,
Yes. I
right?
know. I'm like
Because
all
it's not
excited about
just,
what
I
you're
know, I
saying.
was like, you're going to love this. Not just, it's not just mindset. My mindset is about profit. So all I have to do is just change my mindset and then I
Right.
can be successful in business. It's not that simple because ancestrally and nervous system wise, we
Right.
are wired, if we aren't in that homogeneous group of
Hmm.
people to be profit driven, like we also they're going to have a disproportionate success with adopting technology for creativity because they're driven by profit, whereas then people who are disproportionately impacted ancestrally and nervous system wise, we experimenting with technology like from the standpoint of you can't break it, as using
Hmm.
that phrase, our nervous system is not wired that way because for survival, we and potentially our ancestors before us, generationally, etc., have had to be mission driven. We've had to be survival focused. We've had to be solution focused. We've had to be community over individualism. We've had to. So when society is then structured for
Hmm.
individuals in order to succeed, then we kind of have this answer response of like, what if we redefine success? What does success mean to you? And it's like, that's good. It's still not really good enough because the reality is that we all still have to function under the corporate capitalist machine that is
Yeah.
individualistic and profit driven, that is only meant to for a certain group of people, a very specific group of people. Are you following what I'm where I'm trying to go with
Yeah.
this? So it's
I
nervous
mean,
system work to be safe enough to play with
right.
technology.
It is, yes, absolutely. All of those things are very true, right? And what it is, I think that it's important to understand that we have existed in a very like separate, there's a term for this that I'm not, it's not coming into my brain, but like we've been very siloed in our spheres of work for millennia, like just from the dawn of time of humans, like we've been siloed into these different separate things. And I know one of the things that we briefly talked about on our last solo episode together is that it's not either or, it's both and. It is essential for us to, in the capitalist society that we live in, we need money to exist. We need money to do the mission-driven work that we are here to do, right? And it is it is impossible to, well, maybe not impossible. I think it's impossible, but those people who are in that category that the profitability is really all about money, how much joy is there, right? How much are you really enjoying that process? And that's why I said earlier, like, there's some issues there too, right? And also that the when we think about the nervous system and we think about the lineage and the patterns that have happened there, there are people even in that category of people who are not not enjoying that, not feeling it, not wanting to be in
Absolutely.
that space either, and not sure how to cross the lines. Like, how do you bring in these things that you have been conditioned your entire life and
Yep.
society is telling you is not for you, is not what is going to be supportive for you, how no matter what side of that line you're on, no matter which silo you're in, right? How do you step out of that role enough to be able to experience what's on the other side of it? And that is a very difficult thing to do, especially in the current political climate that we are in.
Yep.
And our nervous systems are already turned up to 20 on a scale of 10. Like, how do we navigate those things and try
Yeah.
to learn new things when we're already so activated?
Yep. Yes. There's just so much there. I feel like we got to a point of like, oh, this is interesting. Let's talk about the relationship between like technology and innovation with your nervous system. But like at the end of the episode, it's like so wild. But I this has been just a surprising delight. And I feel like I've had some real aha moments with the relationship of those things. I already felt like that book had rewired my brain and my perspective, total shift in understanding some things, and this conversation has connected even more dots. I love the two metaphors that you gave that are in your
Mm.
book with the plane and the tomato cage. I think that this has just been truly a delight, and I just always enjoy my time spent with you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for hanging in there with me with a big brave unexpected conversation and direction today. Like, it's not easy
That's
to have
good.
big brave conversations, but especially like off the cuff like this and a different totally different direction than we were planning on. So I mean, also not so different, which
Also
is
not
kind of
so
funny
different.
because so many of these topics feel really different to me. And then they end up having such similar themes that I'm like, I mean, it really all comes back to the same stuff, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
anyways, thank you for being you and thank you for the incredible work you do. And if you're listening and you want to connect with Regyna, of course, like all of that information is in the description and the show notes. And we got to ask the final question, which is, what is something that's making you happy right now?
Mm. What is something that's making me happy right now is just like spending time in nature off of technology. I know I said I'm like basically my business is very
It's
technologically
balance.
driven, but also because I do get to play in that space so much, remember to also go outside and get fresh air and see the
Yeah.
sun. And yeah, I think that's also really important. So yeah, spending time outside is making me happy right now.
I love that. I one of the things that's making me happy, you can't see this if you're listening, but has been the cat activity in the background of Regina's video. I'm a cat team cat myself, so that's been really fun. But something else that's making me happy right now, just as like I'll say small. The small things can bring big joy too, but just as small as liking seeing your cats through like a virtual screen is changas. I have been on the biggest
Nice.
chimichanga kick. And I think part of it is because we've started talking about wanting to make this move out of Arizona. And one of the biggest things about my identity that I would miss about living in Arizona is my attachment and affinity for Mexican food.
Mm.
And specifically, I cannot get enough chimichangas. Thank you so much for being here. I
Thank
appreciate
you
you
for
so
having me.
much. And to you listening, thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. And I'll see you next week.